The Secret Science Behind Miracles by Max Freedom Long. Chapter 21. How the Kahunas Controlled Winds, Weather, and the Sharks by Magic. Hawaiian legendary history tells the story of how the ancestors of the Hawaiians traveled from the original homeland in great double canoes which were driven through the water by the power of magic. This was the same magic which had enabled the leader, Hawaii Loa, L-O-A, to see halfway around the globe and find the island group, which was to be their new home. With this same magic, the winds and waves were controlled so that the frail crafts of the migratory fleet were not lost. Still, another use for this form of magic lay in the control exerted over sharks and other creatures of the sea. This work was based on the theory that when the middle self graduates to become a high self, it serves an apprenticeship, acting as a guardian, or as is called in theosophy, a nature spirit, over massive parts of the lower creation. These spirits are the seat of higher consciousness, which can be seen at work in crystals, plants, insects, birds, fish, and animals. They are the source of the instinctive knowledge which enables the bee to build its honey cell and the bird its intricate nest. As all high selves are closely in touch, an appeal for weather control can be made through one's own high self, who supposedly passes it on to the high self in charge of weather in that vicinity. However, there was a system of direct introduction to the weather control spirits. A kahuna who knew such a spirit and so had a connecting shadowy thread running to it to be used in sending a prayer could introduce a student kahuna and so help him set up a line of connection through a shadowy thread. And this is case number 30. And it's called White Man Learns to Control the Winds. In the following case, it will be seen that weather control can be exerted without the use of physical stimuli, such as are seen in the ritual snake and other rain dances of our Indians in the Southwest. And here's the case. N.S. Emerson, now some time passed over, was a surveyor in Hawaii for many years. His work took him to isolated parts where kahunas were still at work, and he won the friendship of more than one healer. One kahuna, who was adept in the high magic of weather control, undertook to teach Mr. Emerson the art. He introduced him several times to the invisible god, Aumakua, Aumakua, who controlled the weather, and taught him to recite a ritual prayer to cause the winds to increase or decrease. The kahunas demonstrated the workability of the magic repeatedly, so giving him faith in it. Under their guidance, he made the prayer and watched its answer take form. In the end, he came to be able to think of the god and recite the prayer, getting results the same as his teacher. The prayer is a simple one which embodies definite mental pictures of thought forms of the condition wanted. It is repeated aloud and forms a physical stimulus to cause the low self to make contact and to carry the telepathic request of the prayer. The prayer calls on the winds of Hilo, or the winds of Hilo, H-I-L-O, and either asks that the little winds be put back in the wind calabash and the large winds released to blow, or that the large winds be put into the wind calabash and the little ones let out to blow. Nothing in the prayer indicates the nature of its power or the mechanism of its magic. It is not so much what is said as what goes on in the low self that counts in magic. Mr. Emerson retained his contact with the high self, of this level all the rest of his life. Repeatedly, his friends came to him to get his help in quieting the weather when they wished to go by ship between the islands. On the annual kite day at Kamehameha, Kamehameha, School for Boys, he was invariably asked to be present and to make the prayer for the large winds to be let out of the wind calabash so that the big kites could go up. I have talked with a number of people who have witnessed the blowing up of a good strong breeze within 10 minutes after the making of the prayer, although I was never fortunate enough to see it myself. If he ever failed the boys and their kites, I have heard nothing of the failure. And then there's a comment here, and it says, rainmaking was not a usual part of the activities of the Kahunas who worked to get weather control for the reason that Hawaii was blessed with much rain in the inhabited sections. While it's hard to imagine clouds and rain being manufactured out of nothing by the high selves in response to ritual prayers, one can easily imagine a control by which distant rain clouds could be brought to empty themselves at a desired place. Case number 31, and this is called Control of Sharks and Turtles. While I lived in the Hawaiian Islands, I did not hear of a single case in which sharks had attacked and eaten a live person, although the bodies of those drowned were eaten. The sharks are supposed to have their high selves in each group. The sharks are supposed to have their high selves in each group of the islands in the Pacific, and these are thought to have the ability to take shark form at will. Many tales are told of the intimate relations between human beings and individual sharks. Families were often intimately associated with the various creatures and made magical pacts with their guardian high selves. This gave rise to a form of totemism in which certain rites were observed and the totem beast of the family was not eaten by that family. Children and the high selves who watch over the lower creatures seem to have a strong affinity. Children frequently show natural psychic ability and see the little people. In Hawaii, there is a strong belief that human baby spirits may, under certain circumstances, be born into the bodies of small sharks and thus keep up the totem relations between sharks and the shark families of humans. And then he has a comment here in brackets. So, open bracket, speaking of the awareness of children as well as primitives to the high self, I am reminded of Mary Austin's story as related in her autobiography, Earth's Horizons. As a very small girl, she came to know the superconscious and called it I, Mary, in quotes, in contrast to herself, who was just Mary. She was able to obtain help from the spirit in even small things as crossing a log over a creek which she could not cross without help. In later life, she found that the Paiute, P-I-U-T-E, Indians knew the same high self and called it Wakanda, W-A-K-A-N-D-A, or the friend of the soul of man. All her life she prayed to this I, Mary, when in difficulty, and seldom failed to get help. Close bracket. In Samoa, there was, at least up to 1934, a rite by which children repeated a simple chant, and so it seems made contact with the high selves in control of sharks and turtles in those regions. And here's the case. In the Geographic News Bulletin issue of December 10th, 1934, in brackets, National Geographic Society, Mr. George H. Hutchison gave an eyewitness account of the ritual of calling the shark and the turtle at the village of Vaitogi, Samoa, Vaitogi, Samoa. The native children and adults gathered for the ceremony. Then the children were sent alone to a point of land jutting out over the sea. There they recited an old legend, telling how a prince and a princess had been changed to a shark and a turtle respectively. As they chanted, they beckoned. In about 5 minutes, a small shark, 4 or 5 feet long, appeared in the clear water beyond the breaking waves, swam round in plain sight for about a minute, and then departed. Soon a turtle appeared, in a like manner remained for a short time, and swam back to the deep water. Comment. The training of the young to become kahunas began early. By the age of 9 or 10, it was intensified. It may well be that such training helped the low self of the child to easier and more automatic contact with the high self, or the aumakua, and we moderns may someday begin such training at a similarly early time. In Christianity, there is a hint of such a procedure in the words of Jesus. Quote, "Suffer little children to come unto me, and forbid them not." End quote. Of significance is the fact that the kahunas were introduced to the high selves of weather and nature control for the purpose of establishing a connecting thread of shadowy substance between these high selves and the student kahuna. This may have been an ancient mechanism from which sprang the idea of various religions that new priests had to be ordained. Ordination was accomplished through the aid of an already ordained priest. And once the link was established between the priest and the high being, he was ready to begin his ministry. In India, there is still a rite by which this form of introduction or thread connecting is accomplished. The teacher acts to cause the contact, even while not knowing its mechanisms, and suddenly the pupil finds himself able to touch the high self and becomes illuminated. This rite usually includes a physical contact between teacher and pupil, sometimes a slap or even a kick, and it may be that in this act a thread of contact is established through the teacher's shadowy body to that of his high self. While these matters are still less than fully understood, the fact that a connecting thread is needed stands out clearly at times. Various ways seem to be effective to remove complex blockings and open the path of telepathic communication. In due time, when we come to experiment on a larger scale to learn to duplicate the works of the kahunas, we may find a way to become introduced to those high selves presiding over the low forms of life, among which are the parasitic growths which afflict man. Through these selves, we may cause the cancers and tumors to leave. Germs may be handled in a like manner. Only recently I read an account of a person who spoke aloud to the ants in and around her home, promising them the run of the garden unmolested if they would keep out of her house. The pact was effective and continued up to the time of writing the report. And that concludes Chapter 21. Chapter 22 is entitled The Practical Use of the Magic of the Miracle. And Chapter 22 will be the last chapter of this book. And I do hope you're enjoying this book. To me, these two books, The Secret Science at Work, The Secret Science Behind Miracles, both of which I've read here on this channel, are probably the most interesting books I've ever read in my life. I mean, they're full of information and wonder and magic and practical applications. It's truly a delight to read these, and I do hope you enjoyed them too. Till soon.